Hello student, welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Dr. Ajit Jaswal from Department of Anthropology, Pondicherry Central University, Puducherry. Today we are going to discuss about a module called as Demography and Anthropological Demography under paper Physical and Biological Anthropology. Student, in this module we are going to learn about the different concept of demography like its history, its important feature, and also the theoretical changes in the anthropological demography. This module also elucidates rates and ratio used in anthropological demography. So let me give you a glimpse of information about demography in the form of introduction. Demography by definition is a numerical portrait of human population or numerical explanation of human population. The term demography comes from the Greek word like demos and graphy. Demos means the people and graphy implies writing or description. So demography can be called as a description of the people or the writing of the people. Demography as a general sense can be applied to several kinds of changes in the living population over time and space. The study of size, structure, as well as the distribution of population is the basic subject of demography. It seeks to understand the dynamic of human population depending on the three vital processes: birth, death, and migration. Demographic analysis seeks to describe the phenomena about the changing pattern of population, but cannot offer political advice on the tackling of these changes. History of demography. Demographic study can be traced back to antiquity and present in many cultures and civilizations. Demographic writing can be found in works of Herodotus, Hippocrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Natural and political observation made upon the bills of mortality by James Grant is one of the earliest demographic studies containing primitive form of life table. The finding of this study indicate that 1/3 of the children in London died before reaching 16 years. Human societies are always conditioned by demographic characteristics. Thinkers such as Malthus, later Boserup, have made sweeping claim for the fundamental role of population growth as the key independent variable. Khaldun is regarded as the father of demography for his economic analysis of social organization, which produced the first scientific and theoretical work on population, development and group dynamics. Thomas Malthus at the end of the 18th century argued that the population unavoidably grew quickly to exhaust resources regardless of the growth rate in the latter, because of the superior power of geometric series compared to an arithmetic one. Malthus feared that this growth of population would tend to outstrip growth in production, which leads to famine as well as poverty. This flawed perspective was unfortunately used as the basis for population policies biased against the poor and aimed at protecting social surplus for the upper classes. Later on, during the period of 1860 to 1910, there was a transition wherein demography emerged from statistics as a separate field of interest. Defined in this way, demographic studies provide an empirical foundation on which other social sciences are built, it is hard to imagine that a social science can advance steadily without first knowing the basic information about the human population that studies. Demography enjoyed a rapid growth in the 20th century as a field of inquiry. As an example, the membership of the Population Association of America, the primary association for demographers in the US, founded in 1931, grew from 500 in 1956 to more than 3,000 in 1999. This growth is remarkable given the virtual absence of a demography department at American universities. Now let's discuss about the sources of data. There are two methods of data collection. One is the direct method and another is indirect method. In the direct method, we directly get the first hand information or directly get the complete information. In the indirect one, we used to get the information as a secondary sources, as another reason, not directly either from the primary sources or from the concerned person concerned. Direct sources come from vital statistical registries that track all birth and death as well as certain changes in the legal status such as marriage, divorce, and migration. A census is the other common direct method of collecting demographic data. A census is usually conducted by a national government or central government. An attempt to enumerate every person in a country. It typically, generally or mostly occur once every 10 years and thus are not usually the best source of data on birth and death concern. There are other sources of other method also that give us a data like a survey, registration and so on. So these two method, the sources are what is called data method, is can be analyzed as such, which may be a very much useful for the demographer to give us a clear cut ideas the about the size, density, structure, distribution and variation of the population. Types of demography. In general, demography can be classified into two types: formal demography and population studies. Formal demography, whose origin can be traced to John Grant in 1962, which deals with fertility, mortality, migration and marriage formation, dissolution of this union, age structure and spatial distribution of human population. Population studies were concerned with population composition and various factors of population changes from substantive viewpoint, anchored in another discipline. Sociological, economic, biological or anthropological population study employ the concept, method and measure of formal demography. Statistics. Formal demography and population studies not only study different subject matter but also depend on different methodological approaches. Formal demography is built on mathematical and is closely tied to mathematical demography. It has a rich arsenal of powerful research tools such as life table and stable population theory. It is noted mathematical method in formal demography sometimes incorporate stochastic process. The refinement and formalization of mathematical demography and its successful application to human population can be studied in work by Coyle, Kefitz, Preston, Campbell, Roser, and Sips. In its application, mathematical demography typically presumes access to population data and handles heterogeneity through disaggregation. Population studies methods are diverse, heavily borrowed from substantive social science discipline. Since the 1960s, the widespread use of survey data and the role of statistical references in all social science disciplines are predominant. It should came as no surprise that the main method in population studies is statistical. The type of statistical method used in demography vary and change quickly, ranging from path analysis and structural equation and long linear model, econometric model, and event history model. Features of demography. Demography, a scientific decline, has a number of individual features. Some of these features include quantitative nature, interdisciplinary, and applicable. First important feature is that it is mostly quantitative and relatively more accurate, explaining discussion and description of changes in size, structure, distribution, fertility, mortality, marriage union formation, and breakage mostly rely on demographic data available from census, survey, which facilitate quantitative analysis of demography. Because of rich data resources and large sample sizes, many people believe that demography is the most accurate discipline as compared to other social science disciplines. Most influential sociologist Philip Hauser in 20th century stated, working with demographic phenomena thus enable the sociologist to avoid frustration he all too frequently encountered when neither his independent nor his dependent variables are sufficient well measured to permit the observation of possible relationship. Utilizing past record of fertility, mortality, migration, demographers are able to predict future population size, age structure with a high degree of confidence. Second point, interdisciplinary in nature, that is interdisciplinary in nature. Population studies, as said earlier, consist of large part of demography, are interdisciplinary in nature, crossing over between formal demography and other disciplines like sociology, economics, anthropology, gerontology, geography, biology, business, and government management. For the study of fertility and population aging, it uses biology and sociology, while for the study of migration, labor force draws heavily on economic and geography. For mortality study, use health sciences. A typical example of interdisciplinary nature of demography is the national research entitled the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute. It is a part of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Science. Third is applicable in nature. Demography is one of the most applied disciplines of science due to its nature of subject. The subject matter includes size, structure, factor of change in human population. These are intriguing and broad public interest. Thus, changes influence the provision of healthcare, family planning services, education, welfare, housing, government budget. It also influences the work of the planning services, financial institute, and recreation agency. The close correlation between demographic changes and industrial dealing with housing and other household consumption is a good example of its applicability. Demography turned to anthropology or demography towards anthropology. After the publication of Anthropological Demography towards New, the synthesis by Kutzer and Frick characterized the relationship of anthropology and demography as long, tortured, often ambivalent, and sometimes passionate, and recognized that anthropological demography is mainly the result of the opening of the demographic community towards anthropological insight into population process. While the majority of anthropologists still hesitate about learning and adopting demographic technique, social anthropologists during the early decades of 20th century made a profound use of population data, focusing on kinship studies as one of the pillars of the social organization of population and reproduction. In early 1950s, demographers turned to study the wisdom of the anthropological literature. A few anthropologists were invited to join the community on population problem in non-industrial societies of the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population. During this period, later on during 1960s and 70s, two major demographic projects manifest the methodological and theoretical boundaries within which demography has been contained them. One of the projects was Princeton University European Fertility Project and the other project was World Fertility Survey. The aim of the Princeton University's European Fertility Project was to test and confirm theories of demographic transition by documenting the changing pattern of fertility, mortality, industrialization, and literacy in European population. But the failure of this project to explain the European demographic transition in purely economic terms taints demography's interest in culture and anthropology. Suddenly, demographers were forced to consider incorporating culture into model of demographic change. The World Fertility Survey aimed at producing comparable population estimates for countries with incomplete data. But the dissatisfaction with the contextual depth represented by the survey data led Caldwell to incorporate anthropological field method in the construction of small-scale demographic studies. The presence of the field research with collaboration with anthropologists within a common research work allow a better understanding and better evaluation of the demographic phenomena due to the use of local meaning on motivation for action and on sensitive topic. Anthropological demography. Anthropological demography is especially within demography which uses anthropological theory and method to provide better understanding of demographic phenomena in the current and the past population. Howell characterized the field of anthropological demography as a devilish, difficult, but uncommonly interesting. It is both the old as well as new discipline. Durkheim's study of societies rightly be called primeval exercise in anthropological demography as they treat demographic phenomena as a social fact with unique social and cultural explanations. At the same time, it is new only in the 1990s a series of monographs and volumes began to codify the emerging field. Papers and books were published since the mid-1990s, are dazzling in their number, diversity, and quality. There is a big difference between demography and anthropology in models. Models as well as epistemologies could hardly be stark. Anthropology focuses on ideology, power, phenomenological experience, whereas demography is dominated by the statistical analysis of variation within the Western population. The possibilities for mutually productive intellectual exchange are enormous. Despite the distance between the two disciplines, demographic rates are the true fact which could be better understood by the implication of anthropological method and theories. The emergence of anthropological demography as a discipline is gradual and is under development. The birth of anthropological demography can rarely be dated back to the last 2 decades of 20th century. Major anthropological demography theoretical and empirical paper has been published since 1980s, and the visibility of this discipline has been enhanced by IUSSP committee. This committee has a focus on non-Western societies, aims to produce comparable theoretical and methodological collaboration in the European context. Today, anthropological demography borrows heavily from the traditions of dependency theory, world system theory, and political economy in examining local non-Western culture in the light of larger Western capital expansion. There are basically three principal models of research in anthropological demography. The first link biological anthropology and demography, building on work in population biology and evolutionary ecology. A second body of research emerges out of the science and technology, studies and the analysis of demographic science as a core modality of biopower. The third and the largest corpus is the contemporary anthropological demography, draws on ethnographic method and theories of culture to provide a richer understanding of demographic rates, or similarly draws on demographic method to confirm and strengthen the result of the ethnographic studies. Theoretical challenges in anthropological demography. Anthropological demography contributed in providing a redefinition and a critical use of the concept like culture, economy, gender, as well as institution in relation to demographic phenomena. Nowadays, the use of culture in analysis of several demographic phenomena is at the main focus of demographers. Renewed interest in anthropological theory. Hamel in 1990 described how the concept of culture in anthropology has been used alternatively as an identifier of social group, a body of autonomous tradition, a set of coherently patterned behavior, and a determiner of human action. The human behavior is modeled by the culture in the respective society. Hamel proposed a parallel distinction: culture for the people and culture by the people. Culture for the people, by which people action were determined by the blueprint of culture provided to them, whereas in culture by the people represent the way in which social actors perceive the world and attribute significance and symbolic meaning to social behavior. In this sense, culture has the frame of the possible path available, but the actual path taken in the matter of choice of individual. Rates and ratio used in anthropological demography. Statistical data are the raw material of demography. To find out how many people or events were present at a certain period or place. These are all actual numbers, like how many births, how many deaths occurred last year, how many child aged between 5 to 14 years were counted last year. These answers were given in absolute number, like school facilities, maternal welfare services, all this information that is needed. The percentage figure or ratio. It is a simple term indicating the relative size of two numbers. Ratio provides quick and concise comparison between many corresponding set of numbers. Percentage figures are called ratio based on 100. Sex ratio. Sex ratio is the ratio of male to female or female to male. This is not difficult because sex is classified unequivocally onto two categories, male or female. The ratio of the two numbers is called as sex ratio and calculated as the formula for sex ratio is that female divided by male into some specific arbitrary factor, or male divided by female into some arbitrary factor, or whereas we can say that f divided by m into k or m divided by f into k, where m stands as the number of male, where f stands as the number of female. K is an arbitrary factor, it may be thousands or hundred. That is, it is the number of female per thousand male in a very generalized sense, or number of male per thousand female. Sex ratio really a very important factors of the demography because it highlights the number of male present or number of female present in a population. Accordingly, it will be helpful for the planner or for any other developer to develop their plan or modify their plan based on their distribution concern. Child-woman ratio. Child-woman ratio is used to measure the incidence of childbearing of adult women. It is the number of children under 5 years of age per thousand women of childbearing age, that is between 15 to 49 years of age. It is calculated by a formula P by F multiplied by K, where P is the number of the children of both sexes under 5 years of age, where F is the number of female between age 15 to 49 years of age. K is 1000. Child-woman ratio is especially useful where there is no adequate registration of birth. Even after registration of birth, the data are not possible for all groups in the population whose fertility is under study. It does not refer to any actual number of birth, but rather to this census population of child between 0 to 4 year ages. Population density. The term density actually reflects the relationship between the area and number. Area and number over here, it means as we are talking about population, so the number may be related to the number of person, and area is always related with unit. So we can say that the density of populations are the average number of person living or residing in a particular area which is per square kilometer. Density play a very active role as far as the planner or developmental concern, because based on the density, the distribution of different resources can be explained or can be utilized. It can be explained by a very simple formula, that is Pi divided by Ai, where the Pi is nothing, it is just, as I told you, that it reflects the population or number of population in a subdivision I of the country. Here I means specific subdivision, where Ai is the number of person or area in a square kilometer of the land area in the same subdivision where we are counting the number of persons. Similarly, let's discuss about the crude birth rate. It is really a very important factor as far as the development concern. This will give you to some extent the fertility rate of the country. It is actually a ratio of total registered live birth in comparison to total population, or in very simple term we can say that it is the ratio of live birth which is registered in nature to the total population. in some specific year. So, the time period is also very specific. This ratio will be multiplied by 100. So, we can say that the formula or calculated part will be like this. Crude birth rate, it is also called as CBR, is calculated as B divided by P into K. B is the total number of births registered during the calendar year. The calendar here it means, if you are talking about the national figure concern, it is from 1st January to 31st December. This is for the nation concern. The calendar year may vary also. The period may vary also. If you want to calculate for a small period, that we can vary also, but we have to mention it. But generally, as far as the crude birth rate concern, when you are calculating about this thing, we have to take the whole calendar year, 1st January to 31st December, where P over here is the total number of population of the same year. The year where you are calculating the number of birth, same year population will we will use over here, and K is again is either 1000 or arbitrary number 100. Crude death rate. It is the ratio of the total registered death of the some specified years to the total population multiplied by 1000. It is calculated as, or CDR is D divided by P into K. D is the total number of deaths registered during the calendar year, that is 1st January to 31st December, whereas P is the total number of population of the same year and K is 1000 or 100. Age specific death rate. To compute specific rate, it is necessary to have data divided into classes. Age specific dates or rate are calculated as D upon P into K, where D is the number of deaths during the year in the ith age group, specific age group, and P is the number of people in the same age group. K is a constant 1000 or 100. Age specific birth rate. The age specific fertility rate measures the annual number of births to women of a specific age or age group per 100 women in that age group. Unless otherwise specified, the reference period for the age specific fertility rate is the calendar year. They are calculated or computed as follows. Age specific birth rate equal to B upon P into K. B is the number of births registered during the year to the women in the age specific interval of I, where P is the number of women in the same age group. K is 1000. Total fertility rate. It is the number of live births per woman completing her reproductive life. If her childbearing at each age reflected current age-specific fertility rate, the total fertility rate is calculated as TFR is summation of age-specific fertility rate for a single year age group. Next is infant mortality rate or infant death rate. Infancy in demography are defined as an exact age group, namely age 0, or those children in the first year of life. It is the ratio of registered death of infant during a year to the live birth registered during the same year. It is calculated as IMR is equal to D by B into K. D is the number of deaths below age 1 registered during the year and B is the number of live birth registered during the same year multiplied by K, that is 1000. General fertility ratio. It is referred to as ratio of birth per 1000 women of childbearing age, being a general ratio in the sense that it attributes all births to all women within this age limit. without further distinction among them. It is calculated as GFR is equal to B upon P into K. B is the number of live births registered during the year, where the P is the number of women between age group of 15 to 49 and K is 1000. Selection Intensity Index. Reproductive efficiency and fertility is one of the major factors in which selective fitness of a population depend. Hence, total selection pressure of a population is measured in terms of differential fertility and mortality. G.F. Crow had devised an index to measure the maximum potential rate of change by taking into account the differential fertility and differential mortality. He named this as index of total selection intensity, and later changed into index of opportunity for selection. This measure reflects the maximum opportunity for change in gene frequencies due to the selection, not the actual change. Crow's index, or the index of opportunity for selection, is calculated as IM plus IF divided by PS, where IM is the index of mortality and calculated as IM is equal to PD upon PS, where PD is the probability of death up to pre-reproductive age, PS is the probability of survival up to reproductive age, IF is the index of selection due to fertility, whereas IF can be calculated as VF upon X square. VF is the variance due to fertility, and X is the mean number of live births per woman who have attained their menopause. Effective population size. The number of the individuals who contribute to the genetic composition of the population are called effective population, excluding those who do not leave offspring or died before reaching reproductive age. They have nothing to do with the genetic composition of the next generation. The size of the effective population is called effective population size. The number of effective population may be less than the total number of the population. Communities with large and small demographic structure may present the effective population size in the same order of magnitude. The effective population size is a mathematical expression of an ideal population for comparison in the context of evolutionary mechanism. S. Wright proposed a formula for estimating the effective population size of a population. Population pyramid. Population pyramid, also called as a pyramid, manifests the distribution of various age groups in a population. It forms a pyramid-like structure when the population is growing. Population pyramid consists of two bar graph. Population plotted on the x-axis and age on the y-axis. One shows male and the other shows female in a 5-year age group. Males were generally shown on the left side and females on the left. Types of pyramid. There are 4 general types of population pyramids have been identified: stable pyramid, stationary pyramid, expansion pyramid, and constructive pyramid. A stable pyramid, it shows an unchanged pattern of fertility and mortality. A stationary pyramid with low fertility and low mortality, similar to constructive pyramid. Expansive pyramid, here very wide at the base, shows high birth and death rate. Constructive pyramid, it shows older population on average, population with long life expectancy. Now student, let's try to summarize this modules with some of the important points that we have learned in due course of discussion. As we have already discussed that demography is a numerical portrait of human population, or we can say that it is a numerical explanation of the population, especially human. There are three vital processes in human population: birth, death, and migration, through which a population is changing. With the birth, there is increase in population take place. With the death, there is decrease in population take place. Whereas with the migration, there is change in the structure of population take place. Demography can be classified into formal demography and population demography. Demographer turns to anthropological theory and method to provide better understanding to the demographic phenomena. As anthropological demography as well as demography, they use several methods and calculation to find out the population status, to find out the population structure, to find out the real pyramidal distribution of the population, and accordingly they help the planner, they help the developer, they help the ministerial group to develop their plan. Differential fertility and differential mortality are the two important components which determine whether a population is under pressure or not. J.F. Crow, they introduced an index known as selection intensity index to calculate the population pressure. Effective population size is the size of the population who contribute to the genetic composition of the population or to the next generation genetic composition. So we can say that in the demography or demographical anthropological studies, there are four important parameters based on the whole concept revolve around, which changes the dynamic of the population, which changes the structure of the population, which changes the whole profile of the population. One is the fertility, whether it is increasing or decreasing. Second, mortality, its status, it really matters a lot. Third is the migration, whether the migration takes place in which direction and what is the reason behind this. And four, all the other factors that is responsible for the change in fertility, mortality and migration. Thank you.